Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Shea Dixon here on Wednesday, January 3rd. Shea, we just did a reaction podcast to the bowl game, to Mekhi Wingo going pro and Lance Hurd entering the portal. So that's all on yesterday's podcast, which a lot of people seem to enjoy. So thank y'all for that. And just like that, we're back with more breaking news as Brian Kelly decides to part ways with essentially the entire defensive staff. He keeps John Jancic on, but head defensive coordinator Matt House, cornerbacks coach Robert Steeples, safety coach Kerry Cooks, and defensive line coach Jimmy Lindsey have all been relieved of their duties. So that is where we're at right now. And where do you want to start?
I mean, this is the only time I can remember where a coach at LSU is in place where there's no he's not on the hot seat or anything, and he fires an entire staff on one side of the ball. It's almost unprecedented, and everyone felt like there would be a change with a defensive back, whether it was both Robert Steeples and Kerry Cooks, I'm sorry, or if it was just one, but that the DB struggled so much that there would be a change there. And then with defensive line, it was just a tough situation when Jimmy Lindsey goes out with a medical condition that keeps him out all year of his first year being here as D-line coach coming from South Carolina. And that it wouldn't be surprising if Brian Kelly said, let's move him into an analyst role. Let's bring on a defensive line coach. The defensive line did not play well this year. They had to bring in the legend Pete Jenkins halfway through the year just to kind of get him through the season. So the debate was Matt House, and I feel like Matty B. And would he keep him for another year? Like, was it a personnel issue or was it a coaching issue? And that was something we sat around and debated on the podcast, the board, articles. LSU fans would debate it amongst themselves. It appears at the end of the day that Brian Kelly thought it was clearly both. He had said before it was a personnel issue. It also was on the coaches. But when you fire every single coach that's on defense, then that clearly tells me Brian Kelly thought it was a coaching issue. So, yes, they don't have the talent that they're used to on defense, but Brian Kelly also thought they didn't have the coaches that they should have on defense. And look, this is at his feet, right? I mean, these were all guys he hired. He didn't inherit any of them. He went out and hired every single one of them. And now 2 years into his tenure, he's fired every single one of them. To me, that just speaks to one thing, and it's something that we've talked about plenty, but Brian Kelly came to LSU to win championships. He's up there in age now. He's won a championship at the FCS level, had success at Cincinnati, had success at Central Michigan, had success at Notre Dame, obviously. Now at LSU, 2 seasons, 10 wins in both seasons after the first losing season since 1999, Jared DiNardo's year when they replaced him with Nick Saban. Now 2 years in, he's got an SEC West crown. He's won a Heisman. His team has won a Heisman in Jaden Daniels. It shows to me that this is it. He wants to win a national championship, and if he sees things that are standing in his way, he's going to deal with them. And in this case, it was the defense, which finished 108 out of 133 NCAA teams. And he said, look, I need not just one change. I need wholesale changes. I want all new coaches.
And this is the staff changes. Like you said, the interesting part was I was like, okay, is he going to keep House and change all the other personnel? How is he going to go about this? And I think an overhaul was kind of necessary. I've talked about it, the personnel not being good enough, but ultimately, I talked about it last podcast. I mean, we saw in that Wisconsin game how underprepared and underwhelming they were in that game. And I do think that might be like the straw that broke the back at the end of the day. Obviously, this has been in works, I think, for plenty of time as far as a month goes since the end of the regular season, whatever. But at this point, from what we've seen as far as player reactions, what we've seen as far as recruiting goes, and just all of the things that have played into this over the past month and a half to get to this point, this feels like the only outcome. It feels like this couldn't have gone any other way. With the atrocity that we just watched on the defensive side of the ball, you can't just change one position coach. You can't just change 2 position coaches. This needed to be a wholesale change because from my perspective, the defense under Matt House in both years, which includes year one where they had some success, was it felt, and I wrote about this, it felt like the defense was always on its back foot. It always felt like it was reacting to the offense. It wasn't on the attack. And in year one, it was able to overcome that with halftime adjustments, right? We talked about that. They were great at halftime adjustments and coming out in the second half. Well, you were still getting punched in the face first. And now year two, you're getting punched in the face and you can't fight back. And it just was one thing on top of another. And it was unfortunate, Jimmy Lindsey's situation. So the defensive line wasn't as good as it could be. And then, injuries or Greg Brooks, obviously with him leaving and everything just breaking down. But ultimately, this couldn't have gone any other way. And I think, for one, it is the best decision for Brian Kelly moving forward.
And Brian Kelly put out a statement and said, look, this is a difficult decision. Look, I got to know a lot of the guys, all of them that coached on defense that were let go. And they're great guys. They are great people. Guys like Robert Steeples, the kids loved him. But just, I think at the end, as Brian Kelly said in his statement, and you wrote about the story when it broke, but he said, look, this isn't easy, but this is the business. And here's his quote. He said, decisions like these are always difficult. We don't take them lightly, but they're made with the best interest of our program and our student athletes in mind. Moving forward, we will continue working to build a championship caliber coaching staff in support of our mission to graduate champions. So I think it just fits right in line with what we're saying. Brian Kelly knows that, hey, look, there's an expanded playoffs coming. I'm at the back end of my career. He has said it in public multiple times that this is his final coaching stop. So if he's going to win a title at this level, he wants it to be with a staff that he thinks is the best that's out there. And clearly he doesn't think that after 2 years, his staff on defense was going to get it done. And that's tough. Obviously, it affects families and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it's coaching. That's the business. And now we begin to search where it's so easy to forget right now, Matty B, that he's got to hire an offensive coordinator as well. I mean, he is out coordinators on both sides of the ball right now. I know that that's just one position on offense and that he named co-offensive coordinators. And look, if Joe Sloan gets the offensive coordinator job, it just kind of settles that right there. But defensively, you've got to go out and hire every single piece of this. And we've already dropped our first defensive hot board. A lot of names on there, a lot of intriguing names on there. We've already dropped our first of a new installment we have on the Bengal Tiger, which is the buzz and rumors of just names we're hearing, things we're watching, ties to different coaches that could play in to the overall picture here of who Brian Kelly does hire. But I think it's evident at this point that, or I think I should back up here. One thing I'm going to watch for it right now is, do you hire a coordinator before you hire anybody else? Because does the coordinator need to have a say in who he's surrounded by? Or does Brian Kelly name a DB coach and a D-line coach and then hires a coordinator? And the thing I'll throw in there is the coordinator, you can only have 10 on-field coaches. Yeah. The coordinator, like Matt House, also coaches a position. Matt House coached linebacker. So unless you've got a coordinator in mind and you think the deal's done, it's kind of hard to go out there and hire position coaches, because if I want to hire, in this case, Matty B here, and Matty B specializes in D-line coaching, well, I don't need to go hire a D-line coach right now and then in 2 weeks be like, I want to hire Matty B to be my DC, and his experience is D-line. Well, whoops, I just hired a D-line coach 2 weeks ago. So I wonder if the first domino that has to drop is the coordinator.
Yeah, you do. I mean, in a lot of situations, and as you know, we've followed some different coaching changes and whatnot, I do think there are situations where you can hire one of like an on-staff coach at wherever, safety, corner, linebacker. But in general, I do believe that you want to hire a defensive coordinator first. I will say a lot of these defensive coordinators, a lot of these coaches that have been around for a long time are flexible, have coached different positions, like have coached safeties or corners, or have even coached linebackers. That's something that as you get to older coaches that have been in the business for a long time, you see that more. So if you have one home run hire that you're locked in on, I think you can make that. But at the same time, I agree with you. I think the defensive coordinator has to take priority. So with that in mind, I would like him to have a name or two that he wants to bring in as well for comfort's sake to kind of help the rebuild. But overall, I think the names that you and Billy, y'all have done a great job at kind of accumulating so far. It's very exciting for LSU fans, but at the same time, the defensive coordinator hire is the most important, and that's what's going to dictate how this rebuild goes and how everybody is used.
You wrote a piece today as well of what the new defensive coordinator will be tasked with in taking over this roster. Without giving everything away, kind of what stood out to you the most when you say, okay, the slate has been wiped clean. Here's the players. What is the coordinator's biggest kind of task moving forward?
Yeah, this was interesting to do because it helped me take a step back just from where LSU is right now. Obviously, you can get to the personnel aspect of it. They need to rebuild the defensive line. They need to fix back up the back end of the defense. Obviously, Harold Perkins is kind of the guy to me that you want. I think whenever Brian Kelly has these interviews with defensive coordinators, one of the first questions is, how would you go about using Harold Perkins and maybe like a Deshaun Womack? Because that's not only important for this year, but that's important for years to come. To what happens when you get these 5-star players that, all right, maybe it's not obvious how you're going to use them, but you can be creative and whatnot. I just think that's an important aspect. But overall, I think I mentioned it early on, building an identity, having an identity. I mentioned Jim Knowles going to Ohio State and immediately kind of flipping that switch on that defense, and I think that's what LSU is looking for. That's why I think this decision was so important from Ryan Kelly. But the hire has to be a guy who's done it before, an experienced coach, and someone who comes in with not only an identity but like an edge almost to him, because this is going to be kind of a painful rebuild where you don't have obvious talent outside of like Harold Perkins and maybe Deshaun Womack and Whit Weeks and guys like that. But the depth probably isn't there in a lot of spots. You're going to have to make some tough decisions, and you're going to have to really cut your teeth here for the first year and say, all right, this is our culture. This is our identity. This is exactly who we need to become. And that's why I'm excited to see who they pick.
John Jancic, who was an analyst and then moved into the outside linebackers coach role and special teams, and then had to go down to defensive line to help out, is still on staff. We've confirmed that.
Yeah.
Same with Bob Diaco, who's been a defensive coordinator 3 times before with Kelly, is doing special teams work right now after being an analyst. So 2 more kind of notable things there of guys who moved from analysts during the season into on-field roles that were not let go. We'll see how that transpires, whether they go back to an analyst role, or does Jancic take over special teams, or Diaco take over special teams. Diaco certainly will try to put his name into the ring for the DC job, given, like I said, he was Kelly's DC at Central Michigan, at Cincinnati, and again at Notre Dame when he won the Broyles Award in 2012. So we'll monitor that. We just wanted to come on and give y'all a quick reaction to just what happened. I'll say this. I am on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'll let you answer as well. If you were to tell me he was going to fire everyone that worked on defense, I'd put that at a 9. I thought maybe Kerry Cooks would get retained because he'd worked with worked with Brian Kelly before, but he wasn't as a safeties coach. On a scale of 1 to 10, Matty B, that everyone was retained, that everyone was let go.
Yeah,
How surprised?
I'm probably at like an 8 as well. I didn't think all of them, but ultimately, when you have the year that you have and you have the bowl game that you have, I mean, the clip I posted on Twitter, it's just the evidence becomes overwhelming when you have a month to prepare and you still get ran over like that against Wisconsin. It becomes undeniable to a degree. And with that being said, I think wholesale changes are perfectly fine. I think you want to give the new defensive coordinator some leeway. You want to give him an opportunity to maybe bring in a guy or two that he wants to bring in. And ultimately, you don't want to go too far down this path, but even from a recruiting perspective, this staff hasn't, like the previous staff wasn't an overwhelming, like dominant recruiting force to where you really need to keep them. So, I mean, shuffling it up is not the end of the world here from either perspective, on field or recruiting, in my opinion.
We said this would be a reaction pod, so we usually keep those to 15 minutes. We're running a little bit over that now, but we'll finish with a couple questions here that we'll both answer, but I'll ask them. One, Brian Kelly talked so much about continuity being important. It's impossible to have right now on defense when you fired every single coach that coaches there. On offense, Mike Denbrock left after 2 years and took the Notre Dame job, OC job. Obviously, he helped guide them to a Heisman winner, number one offense in college football. They finished the year as the number one offense in college football. Washington is the only team that could have jumped them. They won't,
Yeah.
with only one game left and it being against Michigan. But do you, with continuity in mind, would you be okay, or would you consider it perfectly reasonable and within a realm of expectation of championship standards if Joe Sloan got the offensive coordinator job?
I would be fine with that. I would be fine with that. And I mean, I think you have a great pulse on like as far as what especially when it comes to like that whole situation and how tight all the coaches are and stuff. I think that would be great for continuity stakes. And offensively, I think continuity matters. Defensively, I think it needs to tear it down, fresh coat of paint, everything under the sun. So I'm not worried about the continuity on defense, especially since it seems like the players are okay with you shaking it up and potentially maybe keeping a couple more players there. So on defense, I'm fine with it. Tear it down, start from scratch, all of that stuff. Offensively, I would be fine if it's Joe Sloan as the offensive coordinator, or if it's Cortez Hankton and Joe Sloan as co-OCs. I would be perfectly fine with that.
Same here. And I think that would provide continuity with the offense, the offensive scheme. Nussmeier, who clearly, Joe Sloan has worked hand in hand with him. He's your quarterback next year. He coached him in the bowl game. Nuss looked great. All things considered, being at his very first start. So I would totally be okay with that, and I think that that's a route they should explore. Defensively, final question here on Billy's hot board, which, like I said, it's $1 right now to become a member of the Bengal Tiger. And honestly, with the hot board and the buzz and rumors, I think those are two stories right there. For $1, they're worth it, let alone all the recruiting news that's coming,
Yep.
all of like a 5-star and Bryce Underwood announces this week, a quarterback.
Yep.
Harlem Berry's about to announce here in an hour, the number one running back in the country. And then you've got another signing day coming, let alone other stuff that could happen. So a month for $1. If you're not a member of the Bengal Tiger yet on On3, that's where me and Matthew and Billy hang out every day. We've been there all day today, talking with everybody on the message board, writing articles. This is probably about as good as time of ever to take advantage of it. But on Billy's hot board, give me one name that you read that you said I would like, that would be a good hire. And I think they all would be, honestly, but where you say that would be a big hire.
This is a really, really impressive list. And I think, even if there are names that maybe aren't on here that some fans want to see, those are also good names. Like there's no name on here that I'm like, I don't know about that one. This is extensive when you get into it. And like Shay said, it's well worth $1. If I had to name one, I'm still a believer. And I mean, as I look more into these other names, I think, Guidry from Miami is a name that's been brought up a decent amount on social media and stuff. So that's one that's intriguing to me. But I'll say Blake Baker from Missouri because the past 2 years have been genuinely very, very impressive for what he's done at Missouri with a bunch of 3-star guys. I mean, at defensive back, he has turned them into NFL players at linebacker, at defensive back, and that's the type of growth and development that LSU needs at this point. And he is a guy that can set that foundation. And once you surround him with position coaches that are excellent recruiters, I think that would be a very, very exciting hire. So Blake Baker's one that I know we've talked about for like a year, but he is still a really, really, really good coach.
Yeah, he played at Tulane too, and obviously coached at LSU. Met his wife, who played soccer at LSU, so he would have connections to here. You mentioned Guidry as well. He's a Louisiana guy. I'll give one that has no connections to Louisiana, and it might not even be a realistic possibility, but you have to have him on the list, and that's Jesse Minter, who's only 40 years old, but was a Broyles Award finalist as the DC at Michigan this year. And I think the one little connection you could make is before he got that Michigan DC job, Matty B, 3 years ago, he was Clark Lee's coach or defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt. And Clark Lee obviously was a defensive coordinator under Brian Kelly. I'm sure Brian Kelly would love to have Clark Lee, a guy like that, come and be the defensive coordinator. He's busy with a head coaching job at Vandy, not available. But if Harbaugh bolts for the NFL, and a new head coach comes to Michigan, a guy like Minner would have a decision on his hands of whether to stay or go or, decide what's next in his career. I think he's intriguing. A Broyles Award finalist, someone who clearly understands where the modern offenses are and where they're going and how to stop them and how to defend them. And you just watch Michigan play. They are so good on defense. They are never out of position. They play well. They play hard. They tackle well. And everyone up there sings his praises. So I don't know how realistic that is, but I think he's a name that certainly belongs on the list.
Yeah, that's like Shay said, awesome list from Billy. I know Shay worked on it as well, but the Hot Board 1.0 is out. So subscribe to the Bengal Tiger on 3 if you have not already for that. And we're all over the board. The board has been incredibly active. So shout out to all y'all listening to this podcast that are on the board every day. We really appreciate y'all. And yeah, Shay, anything else?
Nope, that's it. Well, and we'll have plenty to come. This is just kind of a right away reaction. Let's toss some thoughts out there and a couple names, but we'll see where things go, and we'll have you guys covered.
Yep. We'll have to do a mailbag next week. That'll
Oh God, no, we
yeah.
do 2 hour mailbag. I can't do it. We'll figure it out. We will.
We will. But yeah, thank you all for joining us. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. Leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify if you are listening on the audio side, and subscribe to the Bengal Tiger on 3 for the best LSU coverage out there, especially during this time. You get more than enough for your $1 for a month or your yearly subscription. So thank you all for joining us. We will talk to y'all later.